The Shooting Range. In this episode, pages of history, a small shell for thick armor, Squadmates, 2 on the advance to the Rhine, and Metal Beasts, the most popular light tank. As is tradition, we're going back to old vehicles after reviewing the new ones. And today's Metal Beast is arguably the most popular American tank in War Thunder. It's been dodging our attention up until now, which comes to no surprise. After all, it's amazing at dodging thanks to its performance. You might have already guessed that we mean the M18 Hellcat, a machine available to multiple in-game nations. Everything we're going to discuss about this tank is true for all of the variants. The main caliber of this tank is a 76mm cannon with elevation angles ranging between -10 and +20 degrees. The turret is also equipped with a large caliber pintle-mounted machine gun. The crew includes 5. The driver and the machine gunner are in the front, while the gunner, the loader, and the commander are in the turret. The engine is found in the rear. The transmission is in the front. The ammo racks are placed in the center of the hull and in the turret. The main and defining feature for the Hellcat is its speed. Its power-to-weight ratio exceeds 22 horsepower per ton, which means we can basically consider it a classic light tank and employ all the corresponding tactics. Tactic number 1 is flank the enemy and attack from the side or the rear. The 76mm gun, armed with APC-BC shells, will ensure your success in such an effort. They have enough explosives to ensure a one-hit trip to the hangar for your enemy, so you won't have to spend much time on a single target. If the map allows no flanking maneuvers, you can employ another, more dangerous tactic: ambush attacks. Push deep into the enemy territory once the battle starts and find a good place to hide. Keep reasonable and stay wary while you move. A sudden encounter with a group of enemy tanks up close won't end well. For the Hellcat, of course. So, find a good position around the center and wait. Engines are loud, so you'll hear an enemy approaching well in advance and thus have enough time to make sure each shot counts. Sometimes it even makes sense to let the first vehicles pass to stay unnoticed, since when you're discovered, you only have one option: face the enemy. The Hellcat has mobility instead of armor, and you can play it like a trump card, even in tight spaces. Dash out of cover, open fire even before you stop, and roll back immediately. If your target isn't too tough, you won't have an issue with damaging it. The thickest enemies will require some aiming for vulnerabilities or their gun barrel. This trick will help you keep the distance to your enemy longer for a while, before either some help comes in or a retreat path opens. And, of course, remember to use the scouting ability. It both helps your allies navigate the battlefield and reduces the price of your air spawn. Win-win. Many early tanks could boast no good armor. Their protection level only kept the crews safe from bullets and shrapnel. All you needed to counteract that was a 37mm gun, a light, compact, and inexpensive weapon. So compact, in fact, that you could hide it in a bush and roll it around by hand. Arming tanks was wonderfully simple. Just add a rapid-firing gun to the turret and you're good to go. Those guns used small rounds, so even light machines could stock up quite a few. The T-26, for instance, could carry 205 of them. But soon the situation changed. Enter tanks equipped with shell-proof armor. Existing guns were rendered useless and a race of calibers began. Guns and their projectiles grew in size and mass, reducing total ammo count since available space was limited. What could they do next? Of course, you could build a bigger tank for a bigger gun, but engineers hit the ceiling in just a few years. New machines had masses exceeding 60 to 70 tons, which was the practical limit. Various ways were invented to alleviate the ammo issue. One of them was used in the German World War II-era tanks. They were larger and heavier than their Soviet counterparts. There were numerous reasons for that, including the transmission being placed in the front, supposedly tall engines, unique chassis features, but one of the major contributors to this was the German army pushing for a larger supply of ammunition. The Tiger had 92 rounds, while the IS-1 only had 59. The IS-2 had a mere 28 shots in its racks. The German engineers knew that increasing calibers made it harder to put enough rounds inside the tank, so they were looking for alternative solutions. For instance, they tried to increase the aspect ratio of the gun instead of the caliber. A 75mm gun with a barrel length of 70 calibers was smaller and lighter than the famous 88, but had an even higher penetration rate. That was also the reason why the Germans didn't switch to the 105mm caliber. The KWK-43 was enough. They also had another idea for ammo, optimizing the internal space of the tanks. An attempt was made to remove the gun recoil mechanism. The result was a fixed gun whose recoil was to be compensated by the hull. The Germans tested a 75mm gun with this design in the spring of 1944, using a Jagdpanzer 38. It was simpler and lighter than the regular one, but absorbing the recoil proved difficult. The first shot shook the gunner so hard he couldn't move his hand for 2 days. A pre-production batch of 10 more tank destroyers was built later, with an improved design, but it was never finished. Together with research into the guns, the German engineers were looking to improve the shells, becoming the first to widely use sub-caliber projectiles. Those allowed even old guns to damage new tanks, albeit at smaller distances. That time was also marked by increased interest towards squeeze-bore guns. Sub-caliber rounds were their main type of ordnance and produced a very promising result. Let's take a look at the 20-28mm light gun. Its barrel diameter decreased by 8mm, which crumpled the flange of the round and propelled it to almost 1.5 kilometers per second. Thanks to this speed, an otherwise small caliber had a rather high penetration rate. Unfortunately, sub-caliber rounds were expensive and lost a lot of energy with distance. There was no chance for them to become standard. Another new feature invented in Germany was high explosive rounds. Their penetration was independent of both the velocity and the distance, making them a perfect choice for howitzers. Low muzzle velocity, a high caliber, and a lot of explosives inside. Sadly, the rifled barrels of the time could not employ the full potential of the HE rounds. Spinning the projectile reduced its penetration. This issue pushed the German engineers towards experimenting with smooth-bore launchers. They looked exactly like regular guns but shot fin-stabilized shells. If the engineers had solved the accuracy issue, they might have made the best lightweight anti-tank weapon of the time. Engineering thought went along all kinds of curious paths in pursuit of the perfect gun. Not all of the ideas were useful, as we know now. For instance, the hard-fixed gun placement was a dead end. Still, numerous ideas born in those searches, like the new types of rounds, smooth-bore launchers, and many others, found their way into metal, and their history is far from being complete. We've talked numerous times about key positions on maps and the best ways to use all kinds of tanks on them. Naturally, it's great to know the map of your current battle. But imagine how much greater your chances for success might become if at least 2 players with such knowledge worked in cooperation. That's why we're launching a new segment where we're going to tell you just how 2 squad mates can hold the entire map under control and lead their team to victory. We'll start with one of the most popular locations, the advance to the Rhine. Now here's scenario number 1. No matter which map side you start on, choose different spawn points and start moving towards firing points at point A approaches. For the south team, that would be squares E2 and F4, while for the north team, it's C3 and D5. Try to destroy as many enemies as you can, but even if someone slips through, it's no biggie. Just remember the number and type of vehicles and share this data with your squad mate. When there's no new enemies appearing in your line of fire, it's time for you to move forward. The task for the player in line 2 or 3, depending on the side, is to move towards point A and consolidate there. The other player moves from lines 4 or 5 towards rubble piles in square D4. The rest is pretty straightforward. The player who's around point A blocks enemy capture and distracts them, while the other partner destroys them and prevents new ones from getting close. If someone does make it through to the column, the player near point A will learn about it in time. This is how 2 players can cap and hold point A. and if their team doesn't lose their home point, victory is all but ensured. If your enemy decides to push for the east part of the location, which is going to become clear once the blue icons start disappearing off your minimap, you'll need to introduce some change to your plan. The central player will need to move closer to the home point, while their partner based around the monument will relieve their friend in square D4. Two players changing positions simultaneously will save a lot of time and help you deter the attack faster. Next, hold against the enemy on line 6 and remember to defend point A with sight lines overlooking the center. You can go back to your previous positions if the situation demands it, depending on your teammates' actions. Just move to places with fewer allies. So that's it for Scenario 1, the most frequent case. It's a wholly different situation if most of your team moves west at the beginning of the battle, leaving lines 6 and 7 uncovered, together with the 2 capture points. Well, we're just as ready for that. It doesn't matter which side of the map you start on, so we'll limit our demo to one of the teams. One player needs to start off towards the home point, while the other one will move towards the park. This place is great for controlling line 6, the main one on this map. Once the home point is capped, the squadmates need to start moving in parallel along the park. The one who spots an enemy rolls back into cover, while the other one attempts to flank them. Continue this kind of double maneuvering until one of the players gets to the enemy home point. The other one will need to cover their squadmate from the west part of the park. The enemy will still be able to perform a rear attack from line 7, so stay sharp and look back from time to time when you're in the park. If your plan goes well, your team will have 2 points under control, guaranteeing a victory even if your allies fail in the west part of the map. The future's always changing, so these scenarios too can change right in the middle of the battle. Your allies' positions define a lot of your tactics. Remember that just 2 players working together can be worth a dozen uncoordinated single fighters, meaning that even a tiny group can shift the tide of battle. Don't forget to share your experience in the comments, and please tell us which map you want to see next. Meanwhile, it's time we answered some of your questions. The first question was sent by a player called DL Marshall. What pilot skills affect helicopters, and which ones are irrelevant? Hello, DL Marshall. Helicopters don't benefit from upgrading the gunners, the G-tolerance, and the stamina skills. All the rest are just as important for them as they are for planes. Jakub Novotny asks, how can I see if I can get an air spawn with planes? Hi, Jakub. To check if you have enough points for an air spawn in battle, open the tactical map menu. The default key for this is M. Another question comes from Tornatu. Can you do a triathlon for the 5.7 medium tanks? Hey there! We already had one in an older episode, number 197. It's still relevant though, so be sure to check it out. Armor-piercing Carrot writes, will we receive custom loadouts for older planes later? For example, it annoys me on the ME-264 how you first have to drop your 2 1,800-kilogram bombs, and only after that can you drop your 3 250-kilogram bombs, when just an 1,800 and 2 250s could kill a base. Hey, Carrot, you don't really need a custom loadout for this issue. A simple weapon selector defining drop order would do just fine. You can assign the keys to control it in Controls, Aircraft, Weaponry. And the last comment for today was written by Mogahed Arabi. What is the best Su-22 variant in the game? Hi there. If we consider all the vehicles in the Su-17 and Su-22 family, we'd say the best one is the M4. We've recently talked about it in Metal Beasts. It has the widest range of suspended armament. If we limit the choice to export machines only, the ones with 22 in their names, it's harder to decide. The UM-3K has all-aspect missiles, while the M3 is a little faster and can carry more bombs. That's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, and the next episode will premiere the following Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT, or noon Eastern Time. Subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss our next videos. Don't forget to thank your squad mates, leave a like, share your thoughts and comments, and see you next week.